fatal day, and the wind begins to speak with a roar that no man can fail to hear. In a 40-mile-an-hour gale, the center span weaves like a ribbon in a swinging twist that you wouldn't believe possible unless you could see it as you do now. There's an automobile caught on the heaving roadway. The 11,000-ton center span twists and strains the giant cables that support it. Cables of 6,300 wire strands, each 17 inches thick. Back out of the danger zone, all stricken spectators are driven to safety as the bridge gyrates like a nightmare high above the river, twisting, turning, curling. The lone motorist is forced to abandon the car. He has but a few minutes in which to save himself. Will he heed the last warning or perish with the doomed structure? But he saves himself by seconds. No structure of steel and concrete can stand such a strain. Steel girders buckle and giant cables snap like puny threads. There it goes!
The Pacific Northwest is home to many tales of mysterious monsters that lurk in the forests, the mountains, the skies, and the sea. But does it really house such monsters? Or are the monsters that live here you and me?
My name is Jason Glenn. I am a photographer, filmmaker, and U.S. Navy veteran based out of Tacoma, Washington. Now, I'm originally from Michigan. I grew up in southeast Detroit, Wyandotte, Michigan specifically. So we had our own tales growing up, but definitely moving out to the Pacific Northwest, you get a little bit more used to the even weirder tales. So it was awesome to hear about some of this stuff. Now, as I was doing my research for my capstone documentary for the communications department at the University of Washington, Tacoma, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do for the documentary. I had a couple ideas, but nothing was really sticking out. And then I thought, well, cryptids are pretty popular out here in the Pacific Northwest. I could do something like that. Maybe a little bit more, not mockumentary, but at least a little bit more on the lighter side, a little bit more lighthearted. And then I came across the story of King Octopus. It has a few different names. I've heard King Octopus, I've heard Tacoma Narrows Kraken, the Kraken, and obviously the Kraken derives from Scandinavian folklore. The tale is that in 1940, Galloping Gertie, the first design of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, collapsed. The ruins are rumored to be home to a gigantic sea monster, which happens to take on the form of the giant Pacific octopus. Mostly because, well, I have a few different things that I found in my research that I think add to the story and add just a little bit more depth.
My research looks at the historical attitudes toward and reception of and philosophies around ocean animals throughout history and how that informs the way we think about them today. My name is Dr. Kelly Bushnell. I'm a scholar of ocean literature and history, and I'm also a scuba diving instructor here in Puget Sound. So in order to understand the way that we think about octopuses in Puget Sound today, it's important for us to go back actually all the way to the 18th century and a French malacologist that is a mollusk scientist called Pierre Denis de Montfort. And in 1801, de Montfort published his History of Mollusks. This is a natural history of octopuses and squid. but it's based on a story he heard in 1783 of a sperm whale that had been found dead with a 25-foot long tentacle in its mouth. Now, of course, today we know that this tentacle belonged to a giant squid, which is the preferred prey of sperm whales. But in 1783, the horror at finding something this long, the arm of a monster, within the mouth of this other monster, captivated de Montfort. And he became convinced that there were gigantic octopuses, as the taxonomy wasn't quite differentiated very much between squid and octopuses yet, but he became convinced that there were many, many giant octopuses out terrorizing ships and whales across the world. And so in 1801, he published the History of Mollusks, and he proposed that 10 British warships that disappeared in 1782 were not the victims of any sort of storm or natural occurrence, but that they were all taken down by monstrous octopuses. And he even went so far as to say there were 2 different species of these monstrous octopuses. One is the Kraken octopus and one is the colossal octopus. Now, he was almost immediately disgraced because the British Admiralty came forward and said, well, first of all, our ships could easily withstand a sea monster attack, most importantly, but also that they knew already that those ships fell victim to a hurricane. 10 ships on one night and not to the octopus. So immediately de Montfort became persona non grata in the scientific community, but culturally the seed had already been planted. People knew that there were animals with tentacles 25 feet long and that they were out there, and we just had to figure out why.
I love this whole area and the Salish Sea, and I've lived, I think, almost everywhere now, and I'm still pretty drawn to this area and kind of want to just hang out here for the rest of my life. So I'm Dakota Haar. I am a scientific and other sorts of illustrator, more or less, and I'm from Washington State, I'm kind of from California and Montana, but I grew up mostly, I think, in Washington State at this point. I'd heard some stories about it, like when I was in Olympia, but then when I was in science illustration school in California, we had to do a project was to do like a map. And my map was a cryptozoology map because I love creatures, obviously. And so while I was doing that, I stumbled onto the tree octopus, which is my favorite cryptid of all time. It's just an octopus that sits in a tree. That's all it does. It doesn't do anything else. It's not like weird looking. It doesn't like have any special powers or hurt you. It just is a regular giant Pacific octopus that just is in a tree, and that cracks me up every time. So I was looking at that, and while I was doing that, I ran across Grit City magazine, and they had like an ad out to be like, oh, we need like a writer and an artist, and I was just like, I'll do that. They had one that was kind of planned. It was like B-side creatures of Tacoma. And then I think the other one, she was like, we want to do like some sort of local like legend. And I was just like, oh man, I got it, I think. And so then after that, I think the coolest part about that article for me was doing an anatomical illustration of an octopus. You know, time goes on, and apparently that illustration that I did for that article has a little bit of a following here, which I had no idea.
It was the first piece I had done pertaining to Tacoma. So I was trying to piece together some things that kind of really personify the area. So for me, mainly the nature is the first thing that stands out. So the 2 major components of the piece is the sound and the mountain. So I tried to make the sound as dark and mysterious as possible, and of course the majesty of Mount Rainier reaching up to the heavens, so to speak. As far as Tacoma, though, I didn't know how to tie it into the piece. I was going to go with a skyline, and then I decided to stick with the octopus, which I really like folklore. It's very personal, to each area. You know, mythology is kind of a big sweeping thing, but folklore is very intimate. So I really wanted to go that route. And as far as the octopus itself, it's a fascinating creature. It's multifaceted. I mean, it's like there's no end to the surprises that you can find with this creature. So it's a perfect kind of a folklore to go with Tacoma. Because Tacoma itself is fascinating, multifaceted, and it just ties it together. So I figured put him in there and spelling out Tacoma, and kind of like it's a symbiotic kind of relationship, and I just felt like that was the perfect formula for that piece.
Okay, so before I didn't realize the Tacoma octopus was just such a symbol of Tacoma, and I just think that's so perfect for this city because it's such a weird, interesting creature, and this is such a weird, interesting city with so much culture and history and grit like that. So it was really, really cool, and I'm totally charmed by it.
The giant Pacific octopus was voted one of the wonders of Tacoma by locals. They are adored. So how did a creature that was once feared and thought of as a monster become so beloved and capture the adoration of so many?
So with the abundance of giant Pacific octopus out here, I think that definitely helps bring the tale of King Octopus closer to Tacoma.
I'm a huge pulp art fan. I love pulp art, and I love monster movies, and I love old-fashioned monster movie posters, like the old King Kong ones and Godzilla. Those are some of my favorite things. Creature from the Black Lagoon. Love that style. So that was kind of what my hope was for that piece, is I just wanted to create this pulpy Creature of the Black Lagoon for Tacoma, and that's where it came from.
My name is Carrie Foster, and I am a local artist for the company called Shroom Brothers. When I first became aware of the octopus under the Tacoma Narrows Bridge there's a historical plaque down on a building near the public pier in Point Defiance Park, and long ago there had been a discovery and a display of this giant octopus, and she had a female name and everything. So that's what originally stoked my curiosity about it, and I was wanting to put together kind of an art piece that celebrated Tacoma, and so that's how it all started. So the inspiration behind me doing so much artwork depicting the octopus is really my fascination with them. You can put them into any shape, you can do anything with their color, they can change their skin texture. They're fascinating creatures, and when I created the Tacoma octopus art that is our bestseller, I really wanted to take 3 or 4 of Tacoma's most beloved icons and kind of combine them, and that is how that came about. So I think the octopus is so popular here in Tacoma it's just so fascinating, and with what happened with Galloping Gertie all these many years ago, and the mythology that just kind of came up around that. And I really just kind of feel that they're Tacoma's secret mascot. It's not known to everybody, but it is known, and I think that people are just fascinated with them.
It's rumored that there is a 600-pound Kraken that lives in the ruins of Galloping Gertie, the original design of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. There have been some stories that pop up in Tacoma news. Other people have said that they've seen the tentacles, or they've dove down under into the ruins of the bridge, and I've seen the actual Kraken down there, King Octopus, but no pictures, no video.
When we first debuted this particular artwork that I'm talking about, the Tacoma Bridge, or the Tacoma Octopus is what we call it, I was shocked at the response. People were, we put a sample shirt out in front of our booth, and people were stopping midway and coming over and looking and pointing and coming in and can we get one? And we sold out. There was one instance where we had people lined up outside of our little 10 by 10 canopy, but I was really just blown away at the response. And one of the main reasons that I think it got such a good response from the public was because it is a celebratory piece. It's not an insult, it's not a dirty joke or something that's aimed at Tacoma that maybe not everybody can enjoy, but this is something, this particular art piece was something that everybody really just gravitated to because it celebrates some of the reasons that make Tacoma wonderful. This incredible creature in our waters, this amazing mountain that we have. Just anywhere you go in Tacoma, there it is. You can see it. And like I said, I was amazed. I wasn't confident, I wasn't certain about it, but this design really kind of put us on the map, and I think it's for the exact reason of being celebratory instead of insulting.
The first story I heard was the one where there was someone walking down by the bridge at night. And I think this is like the classic one that everybody hears. And then there just was this huge tentacle that just came like flailing out. And like, it's just massive, and they were horrified. And I've heard variations of that story like several times from a lot of different people. And I've heard some people just be like, oh yeah, I've seen giant octopus tentacles. Like not huge, not like, you know, huge like that, but like still pretty big. And the truth is, like, there's a ton of probably pretty big octopuses out there. So
it's not uncommon to see octopus wherever you go in this region. They are carved out of wood, etched in glass, murals on the sides of buildings. They are worn on t-shirts and carried on keychains, hung on walls and houses, and even tattooed on the bodies of residents. This mystical creature has been an inspiration for generations, but the legendary octopus has been around for centuries.
So Victor Hugo's octopus, long before the giant squid that attacks Captain Nemo in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, this octopus is the truest enemy of man. He represents disease. He represents the coming of the Industrial Revolution in a quite negative way to the people of Guernsey. This octopus has even been read to represent the way that capitalism consumes the average man. And this comes at a particularly interesting time in Western Europe. So just across the channel, this novel is published in English in both Britain and America. And in Britain, it comes during what we call the aquarium craze in Victorian Britain. So from the 1860s onward, for the first time, the technology was good enough that animals could be taken from the ocean and displayed live. And so for the first time, people who were not fishermen or scientists or whalemen could see these animals living, moving, breathing through the glass of the aquarium. And an octopus became a particular favorite among people because it was simply so grotesque in the Victorian mind. We think of the Victorians stereotypically as being quite prudish, and in this way, that stereotype is a bit true, because what the papers are saying about the octopuses that are in aquariums is they are horrified at the situation of the mouth between the legs of the octopus. They are horrified at the phallic nature of the tentacles, and it's thought that perhaps women should not look upon the octopus, lest they get any ideas. And so in this particular cartoon from Punch, we see that a young boy has speared an octopus and has presented it legs up, that is where cephalopod comes from, cephalos and pod, so head-footed. He has speared it and is presenting it to this woman, head-footed, upside down, where the tentacles are almost like Medusa's hair. and are horrifying this lady who is intending to put it in the aquarium.
I talked to a historian and professor emeritus for my documentary that I did. His name is Mike Allen. Awesome guy, super fun to talk to, very charismatic. He was telling me specifically about the differences between myths and legends and traditions and tales and tale types. And he was talking to me about kind of where those derive from. Obviously we have oral traditions. We are humans. We are storytellers by nature. He was saying that the tale of King Octopus is more of a tale type. The folklore has more of a man versus nature aspect to it. And that man versus nature really took on an interesting form here in Tacoma.
So all of that brings us to Puget Sound in the 20th century. In 1922, the Seattle Times, as well as a couple of other newspapers, reported that a teenage boy in the Tacoma Narrows had been fishing. He had caught an octopus and he had speared it, and somehow that octopus had grabbed him or his spear and pulled him overboard, and he was killed in that encounter. And so there's not very much information about that, what the papers would have called an attack at that point. But that encounter provides an interesting touch point historically for what happens with octopuses in the Tacoma Narrows not even 40 years later. The first octopus wrestling championships were held in the Tacoma Narrows at Titlow Beach in the 1960s. They were not, however, the first octopus wrestling spectacle that happened in the world.
Hi, my name is Ron Frederick. I grew up in Gullekson, Washington, on the shores of Puget Sound. Went to local schools. I went to the University of Washington on a Navy scholarship and became a Navy SEAL during the Vietnam area for a period of 10 years. After that, I did other types of work, but at the current time, I'm the mayor of the city of DuPont, which is right next door to my hometown of Gullekson. I understand that you want to know what octopus wrestling is. A lot of people think it's a dangerous avocation, but in most cases it was not. To describe octopus wrestling is a little more interesting. It resulted from being a diver in Puget Sound with my dad, and it's something that started in the late 50s or early 60s. Whenever we have cars, people want a car race. So when you ever have some kind of bull, people want a bullfight. So when we have octopus, people want to wrestle it.
In the late 1950s and early 1960s, at Titlow Beach, they used to do octopus wrestling. Titlow Beach in Point Defiance. So octopus wrestling was a sport. It was televised. The World Championships actually occurred here at Titlow Beach in the 1960s.
The way you go about octopus wrestling, first you have to find the octopus, right? And when you're diving in Puget Sound, the octopus has the ability to change colors and blend into the background. They're very good at that. But once you discover the octopus, it has quite a few arms. And the wrestling terminology comes because you want to grab the octopus and bring it to the surface. Well, you have to deal with all those arms because the octopus doesn't want to come to the surface. And so the technique that we developed at that time was to get a gunny sack. Now, a gunny sack might be a term you don't understand. It's a burlap bag, similar to what potatoes used to come in at the grocery store. And we would get those bags and use those when we went looking for the octopus. When you would usually be at least a two-man team, and in my case, it was my father and myself. And we'd find the octopus, and we'd try to stuff the octopus into the burlap bag, bring him to the surface, and then have him weighed when we had a contest to see who brought the biggest octopus to the surface. The World Championships were held at Owens Beach in Point Defiance Park, and we only went to one of those, and I think we won third place in that particular contest. It was about 1962 or so, and I think my octopus at that time was around 56 pounds.
National Geographic actually has the largest recorded giant Pacific octopus on file, which is 600 pounds. It doesn't say where. So there are giant Pacific octopus all over.
Octopus wrestling can be dangerous on occasion. And one occasion in particular is when I was diving with my father at Salder's Point in Stalicum, and we happened to come upon an octopus, and apparently my dad wanted to bring it to the surface. There was no contest going on, but he decided to bring it to the surface. We didn't have any burlap bag with us or anything because we weren't prepared to do that, but he happened to spot this octopus. So he grabbed the octopus, and the octopus immediately grabbed him. And they have all these arms. The suction cups are very strong, and the octopus wrapped its legs all around my dad's legs so that he couldn't swim with his flippers. He was stuck. And so I had to rescue my dad, and I did that. I must have been quick thinking at the time. I grabbed his life jacket, and I kicked both him and the octopus up to the surface and to the beach. Whereupon we endeavored to untangle him from the octopus, which took a good bit of time, even when we're out of the water, because those suction cups are just unbelievable, you know, trying to get those arms off of his legs. The normal situation when you were octopus wrestling is that you would throw the octopus back in the water, and someone else could wrestle him another day. And in this particular case, there was a Japanese lady on the shore, and she really wanted that octopus. And she asked us a few times, and we finally gave in and told her that she could have the octopus. My dad and I had never heard about calamari at that point in the early 60s. I don't think it was even on the menu in most restaurants. And calamari is usually made from squid, I understand. But people do eat octopus, especially in Japan. It's a delicacy, so we did give her the octopus. The only competitions that we entered were the ones held at Owens Beach at Point Defiance Park. And I think we only went to a couple of them. The other octopus wrestling we did was on our own, like at Salder's Point in Stalicum. But the process there was kind of like a big party atmosphere, like you might have nowadays for some kind of triathlon at the beach. And there was music, and there was a bunch of prizes lined up on a table, and they had a big scale up there, and it was kind of get ready, get set, go, and everybody with their scuba gear and their burlap sacks headed to the water. And after a little while, people started bringing up some octopus, because there's a lot of octopus out there. And when you bring the octopus up, hopefully in the burlap bag so it doesn't wrap around your legs, then you weigh the octopus on a great big scale up there, and after a certain period of time, they had a time limit on the contest. After a certain period of time, then they would call an end to the competition. I think it was maybe an hour or so, and then they'd give away several prizes, dinner for two at this place, or some diving gear or whatever. I believe that we won third place one time, but I can't remember what the prize was at the time. But that was the nature of the contest, and then afterward it was just like a kind of a big party atmosphere, and everyone sat around and drank beer. I've heard the question that people wonder if octopuses were hurt as a result of this competition. I would say generally that wasn't the case. All we would do is take the octopus, put him in a burlap bag, weigh him, and throw him back in. So that was a normal octopus wrestling situation. Now, I previously mentioned that someone requested the octopus because it is a delicacy and people do eat octopus. But for the most part, the octopus were just thrown back in the water, and there was no harm done.
I realize it all sounds like a loathsome sport, but it's really more fun than hunting some poor, harmless creature. When you wrestle and kill an octopus, you're ridding the marine world of a treacherous enemy. So this is in the 1940s, and so we can see the echoes of Toilers of the Sea and the treacherous enemy of man really still at the forefront of people's minds. And so in the 1960s, when the World Octopus Wrestling Championships start taking place in Tacoma, we can imagine that the public reception of octopuses is still very much thinking along those lines, even though it does seem that the organizers were very much more using it to try to get people interested in diving and interested in the underwater life of the Sound. By 1976, we were already starting to understand that these animals are special and should probably not be wrestled or kidnapped from their homes. And Washington State passes a law in 1976, which makes it illegal to molest or harass the giant Pacific octopus in the Salish Sea. A lot of that turn of thinking comes from Jacques Cousteau's 1973 documentary and book on octopuses and squid called The Soft Intelligence. And this is the first time that someone with the kind of star power that Jacques Cousteau had said to the world, when you look at an octopus, it looks back at you. And that an octopus is an intelligent animal and is worthy of our admiration. And this is something that divers all over the Northwest will tell you. Any encounter with a giant Pacific octopus is special, but especially one that is huge and in her element is just about the most incredible experience you can have underwater, certainly in the Northwest.
Being in the water and partaking in the ocean as, a participant is an important way to connect to our world. My name's Maddi. I am the manager and dive master of Seattle Dive Tours. My background is in marine biology from San Diego State University. I moved up here 3 years ago to pursue a career in the marine science field and landed upon Seattle Dive Tours, where I found a nice level of conservation focus through diving. Moving forward, we really are trying to expand our conservation branch of this store. We are all nerds and hippies, and we want to protect our planet and our ocean, and especially the area in the Salish Sea, which is right in our backyard, the Puget Sound.
My name is Stina Troyer, and I'm the science specialist with Harbor Wild Watch, a nonprofit education group here in Gig Harbor. Harbor Wild Watch does marine education, and our mission is to inspire stewardship of the Puget Sound and Greater Salish Sea by providing learning opportunities that are equitable to the people of our communities. The giant Pacific octopus is one of those creatures that really gets people excited about the animals that live here in the Puget Sound and Greater Salish Sea. When we get to talking about the amazing adaptations that an octopus has, the list is endless. We can talk about how that animal goes from the size of a grain of rice to bigger than a human. These are animals that really only live about 4 years, and so that is an incredible growth rate, as well as just for an incredible animal.
Octopus, while they seem like this alien species, they are actually in the gastropod family, and they are considered mollusks that just lost their shells. So they're similar to snails, limpets, all those other things that you see on land and in the water. They just lost their shells along the way, and then they got really smart. So octopus do have a brain that has about the same capacity as a mammal, like a dog or a cat, so they're incredibly smart. They also have 3 hearts. They have one heart that works solely throughout the body, pumping blood, and then they have 2 hearts that work directly with their gills in order to do that oxygen exchange. As everybody knows, they have 8 arms, hence the octo in octopus, and those arms are incredibly strong. Primarily from their suction cups, which they can have anywhere from 100 to I think 250 suction cups per arm.
The 8 arms are well adapted with suction cups that are also serve as their taste buds, which is a strange, weird, cool thing. So next time you're shaking hands with an octopus, they're seeing how you taste, which is weird and cool.
Each of those can hold about 5 pounds. So if you do the math, an octopus can actually lift about 20 times its own weight. Besides that, they use their siphon for locomotion. They can use their arms to pull themselves along, but generally they siphon in water through their mantle and then push it out through the siphon to propel them forward. And that's that jet-like motion that we see so often. Actually, the only hard part in an octopus body is the beak. So they don't have any bones. They are completely soft. And as long as their beak can fit through a hole, they're going through. So if you can imagine a beak that's about 2 inches wide, they can fit through a 2-inch hole, which is pretty incredible. Considering these 60 to 90 pound sizes that we see, you wouldn't think that would work, but it does. Additionally, they eat mostly like crustaceans, crabs, shrimp, the occasional fish. So they are opportunistic eaters, I guess. If they can get their hands on it, they will eat it, and they're smart, so they can diversify quite easily. A diver favorite around here to find octopus is to look for octopus garden, as we call it, which is just a pile of shells and crab parts in front of a deeper hole or crevice, and that's usually their den.
So as a scuba diver, a cool way to find a giant Pacific octopus is to look for the pile of shells. And if you see that debris outside of kind of a rocky crevice, it's always a good idea to shine your light in and take a peek, and usually you'll see those big suction cups, sometimes bigger than like a softball. And these, I mean, we're talking animals that can get, I think the record is 30 feet from tip to tip and over 600 pounds, which is just incredible.
They have 2 eyes that can move independently, and their mouth is located in the center of their 8 arms.
The octopus is a master of disguise. They have the ability to change the color and texture of their skin to help them blend in with their surroundings.
They have thousands upon thousands of muscles in their skin called chromatophores. They can open and close to get darker and lighter, and that's how their colors can change so vividly and so quickly. They're the chameleons of the sea in that sense, that they can really blend in.
My name is Dominic Subatilli, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Washington studying the octopus's distributed intelligence. I study the role that the octopus's arms and suckers play in their decision-making, their perceptions, and their cognition. I record their behavior mostly, and what I will do is I will provide them with some kind of problem-solving tasks that they can reach into with their arms and then solve that task, usually by extracting food, by exploring the task, and then I can track the arms as they're doing this and then figure out from there how the suckers are coordinating to be able to solve it. In the last century, there was research into the octopus's neuroanatomy, and what I found really interesting about that research is that they found that most of the octopus's nervous system exists within their arms. Our nervous system exists mostly within our brain and is highly centralized within our brain. But with the octopus, it's very different. Most of their nervous system actually exists beyond their brain within their arms and suckers. Octopuses are incredibly curious and exploratory animals, and something that happens very frequently is as I find myself in lab late at night, these animals, the red octopuses and the giant Pacifics, they'll start to wake up to start to get ready to forage, as they do naturally when it starts to get dark. And being as curious as they are, they will very closely watch my behavior and try to figure out, what I am, maybe what I'm doing. And having that feeling like I am being studied, I think is very humbling, because in a way that they're doing to me what I'm doing to them. Like, as I am studying them, they are studying me back. And this happens, whenever they wake up and start to become more active. Like, I notice that I get more and more eyes surrounding me looking at what I'm doing. And to get that feeling of studying these animals but also having them study me back, I think is a very enriching experience, and gives me a sense of kinship with them. I was interested in the diversity of animal life. I was interested particularly in the diversity of the mind and the diversity of the body, because my background was in psychology, which is a field primarily interested in the mind of vertebrates. The most common models you'll find in psychology are things like primates, humans, of course, rodents, maybe birds, not frequently invertebrates. even though invertebrates make up most of the diversity of animal life. And I was blown away by how among this incredible diversity of alien-seeming creatures, there was this one animal that had this just incredible complexity of body and complexity of mind, and that was the octopus. And so it really just stood out to me being a very unique model for how the mind might evolve along a separate evolutionary path. It's difficult to compare octopus and human intelligence. I think that when humans look at and are trying to study or recognize intelligence in other animals, what we reflexively do is compare those animals to ourselves. We'll look at characteristics that humans have and that we are very good at, like sociality, dexterity, language, and then those are the things that we'll focus on when looking at intelligence in other animals. I think that seems to be misled. I think that that's inappropriate. I think that seems to imply that humans are at the top of this intelligence or complex hierarchy, and then all other animals somehow should be assessed next to us. Where I think that all animals and even non-animal intelligences should be assessed on their own terms. Our common ancestor with the octopus existed over 500 million years ago. And that ancestor had a very simple body plan and had a very simple range of behaviors. And so since then, the octopus evolved their behavioral and body complexity in parallel to that of vertebrates. And so given how long we have been evolving in parallel, we can look at the octopus as a model for how an intelligence might evolve separately on a completely different planet, alien intelligence.
I'm Ed Gullekson, and I'm a diver of 50 years, and the last 30 years I've been diving in Puget Sound, and I take data for Reef Environmental Education Foundation.
My name is Randy Williams, and for the past 10 years I've been working with the Marine Science and Technology Center at Highline College, helping them with their programs. I've been the diving safety officer and the underwater video guy. And prior to that, I've spent many years U.S. Coast Guard. I'm retired marine science technician. Like Ed, I've been diving for over 50 years, so we do pretty good as old guys.
Over all of these years, I've found octopuses and other cephalopods to be just wonderfully interesting. And Reef actually counts giant Pacific octopuses as we turn in our reports. So I've been tracking them all these years, and I love finding them.
One of the absolute wonderful things about working with the giant Pacific octopus in our aquarium at the Mass Center has been having this interaction. I've been with GPOs for many, many years. I've worked with them, shot pictures, videos, but it wasn't until we got them into the aquarium that we have this one-on-one connection. You really start to look at them, and you walk by their tank and they're looking at you like, get the food over here, will you? You know, and they'll follow you around and watch certain people. Others they'll ignore. So they're an amazing animal. So I've been fortunate to have a lot of great encounters in my marine science background with them. One trip right out here in Puget Sound, Blakely Rocks, which is just right off from Port Blakely and Bainbridge Island. We were out with some friends, and Jack Connick, who is a great underwater photographer, he's got a business, and we were diving down there. We came across a particularly big male, and we came across another one. And I think they had just kind of duked it out a little bit, but this really big guy, Jack goes over and gets a couple of pictures of it, and I'm taking shots, and the funny thing is Jack says, "Oh, what a cute," and he reaches over and he scratches it between the eyes, just kind of, "Hi, buddy," you know, thinking, oh, what's going to happen? Oh, this thing reared up. I mean, if you've ever seen a giant Pacific octopus, and this had to have been an 80, 90-pound animal, this thing reared up, arms up, and he's like, he's going after Jack. I've never seen a human swim backwards that fast, you know, and you could hear Jack go, "Get him away, get him away." So here's 2 or 3 of us down there, and he's like getting attacked with his octopus, and we're too busy laughing. We thought it was one of the funniest things we'd ever seen. This thing was coming after him, and Jack's like, "Ah!" He's moving quick. So it was funny. Yeah, they are incredible to work with. This animal kind of finally sat down, kind of looked at all of us, and if it could have flipped us off 8 times, it would have.
I was up at Mukilteo at the clay wall.
Oh, yeah.
And I was going along, and there's this nice big GPO down in its den. And I thought, well, take some pictures, start the video, put my hand down there, see if he's interested in interacting. 2 big arms come all the way up my arm, and I'm looking at it and shooting video, and all of a sudden, yank!
Yeah.
He thought I could go in that hole, and I just had to laugh because the hole was only about this big around, and I was not going to fit.
I do remember the first time that I saw a giant Pacific octopus in Puget Sound. We were on the Hood Canal side at Sund Rock, and she was absolutely enormous, and my heart completely skipped a beat. It was around the time that most octopuses are laying on their eggs, or they're covering the eggs that are in their den, and the eggs are about to hatch. And that signals the end of the octopus's life. And this particular octopus was in about 40 or 50 feet of water. She was covering a rocky den, which would have contained her eggs. And she was completely exposed. So I could see every part of her body and how long her tentacles were, that she had them perfectly curled around her body. I could just see her breathing. These long breaths, and how big her siphon was. It seemed like I could have put my whole hand in there. And the thing I particularly noticed was that the color was starting to go from her. She wasn't blending into her surroundings anymore. She wasn't bothering to camouflage, even though we were just right above her, and she obviously knew we were there. Our lights were off. But it was pretty clear that she was toward the end of her life's journey, and that soon all of these baby octopuses were going to emerge from the den beneath her. So it was really special to share some of the last moments of her life with her, knowing that all of these new baby octopuses would be there the next time we went. And looking in her eye, which kept sort of opening and closing with her breath, was probably the most magical experience I've had under Puget Sound.
So the life history of an octopus is quite interesting because they are all incredibly short-lived. They are what we call terminate breeders, which means after they reproduce and lay their eggs, they die. The male will die shortly after mating with a female. The female will see her eggs through hatching, and then she will also die. And this is due to the fact that they just stop eating as soon as that happens. There's little known on why they do that, but they all do. So we call them the most dedicated mothers on the planet, really.
I found an octopus in a den at the end of January, and I thought, oh, this is cool. I hope it stays here. The very next week I came back, and it turned out it was a female that had laid eggs in the previous week, from the first time I saw it to the second time I saw it. Her arms kept sweeping across all of the eggs, and she watched over everything. And so I thought, well, I'm going to come back every week if I can. And so I started a routine of at least every 2 weeks, if not every week, going and visiting this octopus, which I eventually called Olga the octopus. And I watched her take care of her eggs, and I watched the eggs mature. And there it was. I started in January, and over the months, I watched the eggs get eyes, and then the octopus start to turn white. And at the end of August, the eggs were almost completely hatched. Little tiny octopuses swimming around. And Olga was just barely moving. And the last time I went to see her, the eggs were hanging in disarray in the background, and she had come most of the way out of the hole. And I put my hand out, and one of her arms came over and laid on my hand. And it was the last contact. It was goodbye. I had been there so many times at that point that as smart as octopuses are, I'm sure she recognized and could tell me from other divers who had also been there. So that touched me a great deal to see that major ending of life cycle for a female giant Pacific octopus. She was just a spectacular animal, and I got to be there with her.
I'm Ryan Smith. I'm a nurse in Tacoma. I moved here from Denver about a year ago, kind of to litmus test the area, see if it's someplace I wanted to move. And when I did my travel assignment, I fell in love with Tacoma, kind of the mythology of the GPO, or the giant Pacific octopus that's hiding in the waters out here. So I knew that Tacoma was going to be where I relocated to. And when I moved back out here a year ago, the mystery and the mythology of the octopus really came to the forefront, and I knew that I was going to be diving in these waters and trying to explore what lies under the surface. We went out to Sundrock, and our goal was to find a GPO. And after talking to several divers, everybody's kind of consistently said Sundrock is where to go to find them. Like, kind of the terrain drops off, and you have a lot of boulders that make up the bottom, and it's like a perfect area for fish and wildlife to live in, because they can find nooks and crannies very easily. So everybody's like, yeah, you'll see, there's tons of them there. So we show up, it's kind of cold in the morning, whatever, and the guide is saying the same thing. She's like, oh, we're gonna see them, it's gonna be great. 2 tank dive, you go down, and they introduce, oh, this is the videographer. We're gonna see him on the first dive. We're gonna go to this deeper spot, and then on the second dive it'll be more shallow, and it'll be great. So we get all suited up, and we do all of our safety checks. I'm making sure my camera's ready, and I'll have all the storage that I need so that I can catch all these octopus. And then we hop in the water and we swim out, and there's like a little buoy and a line that connects to the bottom, and that's where we're gonna meet. All right, let's go down. So, we deflate our BCDs and we start down. And immediately I'm kind of like, all right, this is different. And the reason I say that is because of that algae bloom. Normally you will have visibility in like the 3 to 5 foot range, somewhere in that ballpark. I would say in the spring. In the winter, there is no algae, so you can see 30, 40 feet. So you have significant visibility. Well, that day it was like, I don't know where my hand is. And after you punch through this layer, it's almost like a ceiling of algae. So we're descending about 40 feet, and then we punch through it, and we're about 50 feet down, and we see where everybody else is, and it's just this thick layer above us that's blocking all the light. And so you get down there, and everybody has their flashlights on, and that's all you can see. And also at that depth, the water's really cold. So, you're kind of looking at them and you're like, well, there's no octopus, there's a lot of fish, I'm kind of cold, how long is this going to go? I didn't know it was going to be so dark. It wasn't what we were expecting, and that kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. Maybe, and you're also trying to keep pace with everybody in the group. So it's interesting in the sense that as the guide of the group is, like, okay, here we're going to move along, you don't want to be the last one in the group who's like stuck looking under a rock, and you're like, well, nothing there. And they're like, where did everybody go? We surfaced after that dive, and they were like, all right, you ready for our second tank dive? I was like, yeah, I'm here. I'm all in. Let's do this. And so the second dive, we went to the shallow spot where we were supposed to find the smaller GPOs, which weren't there. But same thing. We go out. I left my camera on the shore, and I was sure I was going to see them on this one. Didn't see any GPOs. Less fish in the second dive. It was just so dark. I have followed other divers in the Facebook groups who have gone to Sundrock and seen a lot of GPOs. I know that they're there. I just don't think they like me.
People have asked me about the proliferation of octopus in Puget Sound at the present time. Most of the really large octopuses are near Tacoma Narrows Bridge, and that's why they had the octopus wrestling contest at Owens Beach in Point Defiance Park. However, we found octopus in different places. In Salish, we came across several, but in the most recent years when I went diving, which has been a number of years already, I've never seen any more octopus in the Salish area. I'm sure there are plenty still around the Narrows area, but I assume that there probably are not as many octopus now for a variety of reasons, whether it's climate change or pollution or overfishing or whatever. Is probably many of the reasons for it, because the octopus needs a certain environment, certain temperature of water and nutrients and all that. So my assumption is that there probably aren't as many as there was 50 years ago.
So the IUCN Red List is kind of a tool to assess the risk of extinction to different species. So animals like the sunflower star just recently got listed. This is a sea star species that isn't doing so hot after sea star wasting. And while the giant Pacific octopus isn't evaluated on this list, there's still some threats to the well-being of this incredible animal, mostly thinking of climate change and the repercussions that has. There's a whole suite of various things that can negatively impact not just the giant Pacific octopus, but all sorts of creatures that call the Puget Sound home. And so in the face of climate change, the warming seas can cause issues with the GPO. With warmer water, you have less oxygen able to be in that water, and so those octopus are going to have to shift habitats to areas where there's enough oxygen for them to survive. Or increases in acidity. That ocean acidification can cause big risks for our octopus's food sources. So those shell builders that depend on the carbonate ions that are in the water, that becomes less available as our oceans get more acidic. And so if there's no shell builders that are tasty little treats for those octopus, then they're not going to have as much food availability. And so all those things can kind of add up to negatively impact the giant Pacific octopus, as well as other creatures that call the Salish Sea home. People really enjoy seeing giant Pacific octopus at certain dive sites, and even though they're legal to harvest, that's absolutely something you can go out and catch and eat. It really upsets people when that octopus that you like to go visit at that particular dive site is taken. And so I know there was some local uproar over a totally legal harvest, but kind of an inconsiderate one where a local octopus was harvested from a dive site that people like to go visit that octopus. So because of that, there's now octopus protected areas, and so that is a nice handful of dive sites where you're not allowed to harvest the giant Pacific octopus from those areas.
In the years that I've been diving, many years, I've been fortunate to dive around a lot of this planet, and there's areas I've yet to go, and I've witnessed some bad things and some good things. I'd say as far as this region in our Puget Sound, North Pacific region, I've seen a loss of some habitat that is disturbing. We're losing kelp. We've lost eelgrass beds, which are critical because that's where the larvae and the young critters go. And that's why an organization like the one I belong to, I'm with, is Washington Scuba Alliance, and working with various other marine science groups, why we want to fix it, why we want to help to bring this back, and it can be done. We've already done successful transplants of eelgrass beds. Scientists that I've worked with, and kelp, we're losing kelp, and that's the biggest loss, our species of Nereocystis. So from my perspective, and working with other people in the science field, I'm no scientist, but I've worked enough with them, as a science technician, is that we all agree we've got to get things back in balance. And it kind of bothers me that we're not getting some of the results out of people I would like to see. Like everybody says, we got to fix the environment. Well, we have ways of doing that. Hey, we've got a program. Oh, well, no, we're not bothered with this. And that bothers me, these other environmental groups that I've worked with, when they're like, well, that's really not our mission. What is your mission? Isn't the mission, all of us, is to clean up Puget Sound? So we got to start thinking, what are we going to leave the next multiple generations? And as far as a diver goes, in my world, clean up the water. You got to clean up the marine environment. Everything else will fall into place.
One thing that would help our waters immensely, and it's a catchphrase that's caught on and is a really big deal in the nation right now, is see something, say something. I'm Jim Trask. I'm president of the Washington Scuba Alliance. Washington Scuba Alliance has done a number of changes over the years. We started out promoting tourism, dive tourism in Washington State. We wanted to introduce a lot of new structure into the water. And for instance, when we did and completed Saltwater State Park in 2009, working with Washington State Parks, it was a really big deal. And Washington State Parks requested this reef to be done from us. And so 12 years later, it is one of the most beautiful places to dive in the state of Washington. It's totally covered in sea life of every kind, vertebrate, invertebrate, you name it. It's at Saltwater State Park, and it's just a beautiful location. We're narrowing our focus onto restoration, preservation, education, and advocacy for our waters. And that seems to be getting us a lot more attention from other groups of like minds. So that's pretty much what we're all about. And we're becoming really more popular and more visible to the community. We did a big cleanup down at Point Defiance Boathouse. This was at the request of Metro Parks of Tacoma. They go, we don't think this has ever been cleaned up underwater here. And they go, do you think you guys could come in and do it? And I go, by all means, we will be more than happy to come in and do that. I put out to Joint Base Lewis McChord Dive Club, you guys are first. If you guys want to come down, do this, I promise you a dive experience that you have never experienced before. And they go, what? I said, no, we're going to save it till that day. Just want you down there. So they came down. We had a few other dive clubs because we'd posted it on our Facebook page. Everybody come down and bring 2 tanks. And we ended up that day with 22 divers. And they go, okay, what are we going to do? I go, well, you're going to get in that elevator over there, and you're going to go in and sit down, and you're going to put your fins on. And then we're going to lower you into the water. And then you're going to swim out and go do your thing in cleaning up underwater.
It was the last really rainy day I think we had around here for the longest time. But I didn't stop anybody from showing up.
The cleanup at the Point Defiance was the first cleanup I've been to, and it was just it's a cool experience to be able to go down there and pick up some trash and meet a whole bunch of amazing divers. My name is Logan Grass, and I'm 16 years old. I think what got me into diving was I've always been interested in marine biology and the ocean, and so becoming a diver was kind of like a way of discovering more about that ecosystem.
I did a lot of the dives, got in there, did 2 dives, worked with people. Of course, I was trying to shoot a lot of underwater video too. And it was great to work with a lot of people I had never met, and they were wonderful. So I was very happy to see the support and the number of people that came out.
When I was at the cleanup, I was surprised to see just how much trash was down there, and that the wildlife was trying to adapt to it, but it wasn't quite right. And of course, it's pollution and it needs to come out, so it just totally disrupted that wildlife because we had to move it, and it's just like, well, it needs to find a new home now. It was cool to be able to put on all your gear and then hop on the elevators they have, and it just lowered you like right down to the water.
All in all, we ended up with 810 pounds of garbage that we collected that day. As we said earlier, it had never been done before, and there was garbage everywhere. And we were pulling up stuff, and we were finding octopus in lots of pieces. There was crab traps, shrimp traps, you name it, it was down there. We even picked up 2 picnic tables, and the divers said, we can do this. we can get that picnic table on that elevator. It was wonderful that the Metro Parks had a blast doing it. They were really impressed with what we did. It's good partnership with the city and the dive community.
The Salish Sea has recently been designated by Sylvia Earle's Mission Blue organization as an international hope spot, which means that we'll be especially focused on conservation in the coming decade. And this can't come soon enough, because there is nothing more heartbreaking than being 50 or 60 feet down, looking in caves, and you're looking for an octopus, and instead you find plastic. We do a lot of cleanups here in the Northwest. We have a lot of fishing debris, and I can't tell you how devastating it is to find an animal who's ingested plastic, or to see fishing line wrapped around an animal, or to see the scars. And with the octopus, unfortunately, they're so secretive that we won't see the entangled octopus. She'll simply recede and die.
If you see somebody dumping stuff, if you see somebody throwing batteries off the edge of a dock, anything that doesn't look like it's something that's going to benefit our waters, report it.
Well, I'm asked, potential futures. We talk about the octopus, our giant Pacific octopus. It's a concern. It's one of my favorite animals. I consider one of the top 5 iconic animals of Puget Sound. However, here, I think we put a lot more dent in their population. While I'm very fortunate to be around large groups of divers with like minds, we want to treat them good. We want to make sure these animals are protected and carried on. We have unfortunate other conditions. We have pollution. We have huge amounts of people, as I mentioned earlier. But it's questionable. When we couldn't find for a couple of years, all of a sudden all the usual haunts, how come we're not finding GPOs out here? And then I go back, talk to the various scientists, specialists. Says, no, we don't think the population's gone. We just think they're probably hiding out somewhere. And it's really a tough one. I don't think the population of the octopus is hurting as bad as a lot of people think. I just think they're hiding out and moved on, and I'm not alone in that thought. So habitat protection, like everything else, is not the individual animal, it's habitat protection, because that feeds the entire system. So I'm hoping we'll keep on diving, do our best, and trying to educate.
So with climate change, there is unprecedented decline in biodiversity. And so even as we speak, there are species going extinct out there in the world, terrestrially, in the ocean. And so our chances to study this biodiversity are declining by the day. And so it's all the more important that we take the opportunity now to understand all the variety of forms that biology has made of life.
So the things that harm octopus are generally the things that harm the entire ocean at any level from micro to macro. Moving forward, I think octopus can recover. The Seattle Aquarium does an octopus survey every year, and we are seeing that those giant Pacific octopus numbers are returning. But that doesn't really mean we can just stop doing the things that we can to protect them, including educating divers and other people that go into the ocean to not take anything, to respect the environment. We love to say, take only pictures, leave only bubbles, kill only time, because we're in their home and not the other way around. And we would like that same respect. You don't have to be a diver to protect octopus in the ocean. Everything that you do in your day-to-day life can be made with some small changes that helps the ocean, reducing the amount of plastic that you use every day, making infrequent trips when you get in that car and you release those emissions. Every time you pick up a piece of litter, especially on the beach, it reduces the amount of pollutants that are going into the water that are adding to all these causes and harms that our oceans are experiencing. The octopus intelligence is higher level, as we've seen. When we think of smart animals, we think of dolphins, we think of dogs, things that can be trained, but octopus are intuitively incredibly smart. And you see that in the way they move and the way they adapt to their surroundings. If we can respect for that kind of intelligence in an animal as small as an octopus, I think every animal on the planet can be given that same respect. Because there's so little that we know, because we can't communicate with them doesn't mean that that intelligence isn't there.
I am concerned about our waters, the rising sea level, the acidity in the water, plastics being found in our fish, and just walking along the beach, all of the garbage and detritus that is not nature, and it's starting to affect everything. We need water in our lives, and it's not just for drinking, but for pleasure, fishing, and all of these creatures that live in the water. They're affected by all of this stuff that's happening negatively, and it's all going to go away. We're going to have fewer viewings of these beautiful animals because of the rising temperatures, and like I said, the acidity and the garbage and the plastics and the noise pollution. And we should be stewards, we should be guardians, we should be taking care, and we're not. And it's all going to go away if more of us don't step forward and do something about it. Whatever those things are, whether you're going out to pick up garbage or you're being mindful of your use at home. Yeah, it's scary, and it's all going to go away if we don't take care of it.
Staying educated is really important, and I think being open to nature documentaries, scientists, talking to the local area about what you can do, and even just learning about what is out there. A lot of times people see the surface of the water and all they think is water. When people actually see these animals and they go to the Seattle Aquarium and they see that giant Pacific octopus resting on the rock, and they're like, that's right there, that's underneath our feet, that can be enough to make people rethink every day what their choices are. And if that's not using plastic bags, if that's as simple as maybe not getting that plastic straw, then that's absolutely huge.
Our waters are in deep trouble, and it's going to take all of us collectively to come together and figure out a way to clean it all up. And to make that happen is going to be a Herculean effort, considering all the things that we're working on every day just to get ourselves through our daily regiments individually. We still have to worry about what is going on with our planet and our waters.
The giant Pacific octopus represents so much truth of what's been, what is, and what's to come. They are resilient survivors like us, and there's no proof that their species is a threatened one. But if you consider those species that are threatened and how reliant on those species the entire ecosystem is, then you can calculate the outcome. You can see how those tiny organisms play a part in the greater scale of things, and that without them, eventually everything will die. Humans are a very intelligent species of life, and we advance so quickly that it's easy to miss the damage we are indirectly causing our planet and other life forms. Some of us are teachers and some of us are students, but no one knows everything, and everyone has plenty to learn. I think sometimes we forget how big everything really is, and that we too are just tiny organisms in this entire ecosystem as a whole. Humans are vital in what happens to our world. They are the most responsible for the current conditions and those that follow. With that comes tremendous responsibility to not only appreciate but also to respect and care for what was already here. It is up to us to give back and to protect and preserve what's left. It is not too late, not yet. We can still reverse the damages that have been caused by a lack of understanding and research from the past. But we can't afford to stay there. Now we know better. Now we know more. Now we need to fix it, or the future won't be there for anyone. Hi, I'm Samantha Hanna, the director of the Giant Pacific Octopus, and I have some special thank yous because I could not have made this movie on my own. So I want to shout out Scott from Saddle Dive Tours. Thank you so much for hopping on board. You were the first one I reached out to, and you reached back with open arms and gave me some of my best interviews. So thank you, Scott. And a special thanks to Dr. Kelly Bushnell, who came to an interview with a bang and changed the entire course of my movie in such a good way. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Dominic, who I semi-stalked to get into the movie. Thank you for finally giving in and doing an interview. And thank you to everyone who interviewed, because you guys brought my story to life, and I couldn't have done it without you. And I couldn't have done it without so many people, the support that I received and the support of the community, financial support as well as otherwise. I got a lot of support. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the City of DuPont for lending us your mayor. Thank you to Metro Parks of Tacoma and Point Defiance, Washington Scuba Alliance, Harbor Wild Watch, Friday Harbor Labs, UW Campus, Mass Center of Highline College, and any organization that's doing their part to help us clean up our waters and preserve, educate, protect. Thank you to the Miller family and Theory Real Estate, also Todd Resser. Thank you to Ryan Smith and Jason Glenn for not knowing me but hopping right on board and helping me so much with this project. Also, thank you, Anthony Espina, for your beautiful score and your beautiful music. And I want everyone to remember that any effort matters and no contribution is too small. Thank you for watching my film. I hope you enjoyed.